All right, we are live for Salt City Hoops live postgame. I hope you all are excited to join me and talk about a dominating performance for the Jazz over the Golden State Warriors. Man, it's fun to win these games, right? I'm having a lot of fun actually watching some winning Jazz basketball. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today, but as promised, this is a live postcast and beer broadcast, so I will be cracking it open with you today. Hope you all are having a good time tonight. It's Wednesday, or as I like to call it, the third Saturday of the week. I'm drinking Belgian strong ale tonight, conveniently priced at 9.99 ABV. Keep it under 10. Why do one beer when many beer do trick, right? Or I should have done that reverse. But we're having fun tonight, especially because the Jazz had a great win over the Warriors, and we had a very newsworthy day for the Jazz and the NBA in general. And guess what? To cap it all off for any Jazz fan or any NBA fan who isn't a Lakers fan, the Lakers lost to Portland tonight. They didn't have Russell Westbrook, but they did have LeBron and AD, and Portland doesn't really have anybody on their team right now, so pretty stunning loss for the Lakers, and anytime that happens, you can get pretty happy about that. The Jazz haven't had a triple-double since 2008, and it was Carlos Boozer, not Darren Williams, who averaged over 10 assists a game. You were always thinking like, oh, if he ever pulled in double-digit rebounds, he would surely have a few. I think Darren Williams did have a couple, but the most recent one for the Jazz was Carlos Boozer getting 10 assists back in 2008. Ricky Rubio did have 10 rebounds and pulled off a triple-double in the playoffs, but and I do consider that the formal, most recent triple-double for the Jazz. But if we're being honest, and going with the official stat-keeping purposes, it's Carlos Boozer back in 2008. It's the longest streak in the entire NBA. So I find that awfully surprising, but also funny. Like, how many years are we really going to go? You think about the players on the Jazz, like as good as the Jazz are, like how good can they be? And the players, though, on the team, like they're not really triple-double kind of guys. You might see Donovan pull off 10 rebounds here and there. You might see him pull off 10 assists here and there, but he averages, 5 and 5. He's not going to be special on both categories all at once unless he's going to play 50 minutes in some sort of double overtime game. So I don't think we're going to see a triple-double for quite a while. Maybe Rudy Gobert has a bunch of blocks, but Hassan Whiteside in his career actually has a triple-double with blocks. And Rudy just isn't the kind of guy to chase blocks. And also he has a reputation to kind of scare people from even attempting them. I think he challenges something like 23 or 22 shots a game, and I don't even think he's that and that doesn't take into account the other attempts that just don't even occur against Rudy. So I don't think Rudy Gobert is really going to have a triple-double, but Donovan Mitchell came close. I didn't put up his stats, but he had his points in the teens. He got his 10 rebounds. And he finished with 8 assists. He had a couple passes there at the end that went unrequited. So the Jazz triple-double streak goes unrequited. The Warriors today, on the road, they're on a 9-game win streak. They were without Klay Thompson and Draymond Green for various reasons. Draymond Green has been out for a little while. I think that actually affects the Defensive Player of the Year race. We'll get into that shortly. But the Warriors have been touted as one of the deepest teams in the league. I think that's right, because I think no team is really deep right now, and I think as many teams suffered coronavirus issues with absences, the Warriors were able to weather that storm the best, because they have players like Jonathan Kuminga, who can just he's a rookie, he is learning the game, but his athletic skills and his NBA knowledge, you can kind of throw him out there and be like, hey, we need 20 minutes out of you tonight, and he's able to provide that. But I do think it's a misnomer to call the Warriors one of the deepest teams in the league as far as what happens when they're missing multiple of their top 8 guys, and they have to play NBA level talent for the most part. Like the Jazz are missing Rudy Gobert, but I'll be honest, like I thought this game would not be a blowout for sure. But they had everybody else, right? Like when you got Donovan and Mike Conley on the floor, you're probably going to have a pretty good outcome, especially with Udoka Azubuike coming on as of late. Hassan Whiteside finally rounding into conditioning form after a coronavirus absence. So we really saw the Warriors' deep reserves struggle in this game against the Jazz's real, true NBA talent. Jonathan Kuminga being another example of that. Like, right, it's just there were some errors that he made defensively, offensively. I don't think any Warriors fan will tell you that they want to rely on Damian Lee for anything. So, the end result is we had blowout where the Warriors seemed a little bit outmatched tonight. But it wasn't due to... I mean, Curry didn't have that dominating performance, right? He couldn't carry his team. And I don't think that's really what you expect of him anymore. You really do expect him to just be like that star player that can be your ceiling raiser. But he's not going to... He's a little bit past the level of being able to single-handedly drag a bunch of guys past a road victory. Wouldn't be stunning if Curry was able to do that, but it's just not what you expect of him, and it just wasn't going to happen tonight. My Twitter and my ESPN are updating slowly, so I wonder if there's an internet issue or if my Twitter's just updating slowly, but my Twitter Spaces also was unable to load, so I'm going to try to get that going. Get some more folks in here. Let's see here if we can get the Twitter Spaces going on. I think Twitter's having a little bit of a slowness issue because I have been unable to get my Twitter Spaces going today. But we're here, enjoying a win. We're going to talk a trade deadline soon. We're going to be here talking about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, newest Jazzman soon. We'll also talk Juancho Hernan-Gomez, but nobody really wants to hear about him. But we'll talk about what his addition means for the Jazz and what it means for Joe Ingles, who was traded. Just to clarify that for anybody, there were some sad messages posted by Joe and his wife Renee today about leaving Salt Lake City and this being the end of everything. I think that's a little premature. I'll get into it, I think, a little bit later, but I don't think Joe Ingles is really going anywhere, especially this season. You're definitely not going to see him on the bench or anything, but I think it's a little forward to consider Joe Ingles completely gone from the Jazz. Like, we don't need to hang his jersey in the Raptors quite yet. So let's see if we can get this Twitter Spaces going real quick. Salt City Hoops live postcast. There we go. I think we're live now. After some connectivity issues, the Twitter Spaces is now live to chat Jazz Warriors. There we go. All right, we got that tweet out there, so I feel a little bit more comfortable that at least somebody might join us today on talking about Jazz Warriors here. So let's get into, we talked about the game a little bit. Obviously, it was a blowout. Donovan almost got his triple-double. Rudy Gobert is still out. Udoka Azubuike has continued to show that he can play NBA minutes, and he's not a complete wash of a center prospect. For comparison's sake, I do think that he's slightly better than Ed Davis was when Ed Davis was was playing with us. And thanks everyone for joining on the Twitter Spaces. We're also on live on YouTube. I posted that link out earlier. That's where I'm on video, saying hello to everybody. But if anyone wants to chime in with a question or anything, I'm happy to take your question. And that question will also be broadcast to the Salt City Hoops Live YouTube channel. Otherwise, you're happy to hear my rambling about the Jazz. I'm going to get talking about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Who the fuck is that guy? I'm going to talk about the trade deadline in general. And I'm going to talk about what Joe Ingles' departure actually means for the Jazz. And meanwhile, I'm drinking a 9.99% ABV Belgian Strong Ale, or Belgian-style Golden Strong Ale, I should say. Brewed by Four Noses here in Colorado. And that's right, I'm a Colorado-based Utah Jazz fan. Don't yell at me. So I hope we're having fun. It's Wednesday. I know it's a late game. People are trying to get to bed. So I've promised that I would get into talking about things, so let me actually talk about them. Fun game today. I'm really glad that we showed up against no Draymond, no Clay Warriors tonight, but Curry did play, Andrew Wiggins did play, Kevon Looney did play. One of my favorite players to watch, Gary Payton the second, did play. He is an unbelievable defender for the Warriors. He is exquisite in what he covers up so many mistakes like Rudy does on the front in the front court. Gary Payton does a lot of stuff covering up mistakes for the Warriors, and he had a great block on Bojan today. Of course, Bojan complained about it. He might have been fouled, but it was a really impressive block from Gary Payton today. And so the Warriors presented a formidable opponent, but the Jazz have a new verve after this January. I think Donovan coming back. And look, nobody wants to get a concussion, and concussions can have long-lasting effects, which is the injury Donovan Mitchell had. However, I do think it is healthy in today's day and age to take a physical break in the NBA. The All-Star break is not long enough, especially over the past couple years, and I would be wary of long-term damage that these compressed seasons have done to a guy like Donovan Mitchell, who is just a very athletic forward kind of player. I think it's important for a guy like Donovan to be able to take a break once in a while. And while his mental health, not in a psychological sense, but his brain health was important over the past few weeks from the concussion, I do think it's important that he was able to take a physical break to his muscles and his joints. And he has come back from this concussion and just been on a physical tear. His brain is working at 100,000 miles an hour, firing off amazing passes. He was special over the past couple weeks, and especially tonight. He had 8 assists, 10 rebounds, almost had the triple-double. I don't have the specific stats for him up right now, but I think it was like 16 points or 17 points and 10 rebounds and 8 assists. It would have been the first triple-double in the regular season for the Jazz since 2008. When Carlos Boozer, not Darren Williams, who you might have expected, it would have been Carlos Boozer, who had the last regular season triple-double for the Utah Jazz. Yes, Ricky Rubio did have a triple-double in the playoffs against the Oklahoma City Thunder in the playoffs, but for official record-keeping purposes, that's not what we formally refer to it as. If you're thinking to yourself, not having a triple-double since 2008, well, I mean, you might be thinking to yourself, well, James Harden and Russell Westbrook get those all the time, but I know they're pretty rare. Well, the Jazz are the last team since 2008 to record a triple-double, so they are. I will find a very ineloquent way to say this, but it's been a while for the Jazz, longer than any other team in the NBA. So it's been interesting. When you think about the great players the Jazz have had, you start thinking like, well, I guess it makes sense that they haven't had a full-blown triple-double. But a lot of the other NBA teams who have had triple-doubles in the past, 20 years have been from players that you also wouldn't expect, too, in blowout games, right? Where a team is only dressing 6 or 7 or 8 guys because they're tanking or whatever. And I think the Suns had a triple-double from, like, Brandon Knight or something, right? Where it's like the guy plays 44 minutes and there's nobody else to rebound the basketball except for your point guard. And so he gets a triple-double and a 30-point loss. So no triple-double today. I like the streak because it kind of speaks to the balance of the Jazz and how good they've been. But besides that, bigger news. Look, the Jazz winning today, I'm hoping, the last thing I'll say about the game today, is I'm hoping that a great win today with great performances across the board from Conley and Pascal and Whiteside almost getting a triple-double with fucking blocks. I'm hoping that a win today, a blowout win against a very good Warriors team. If we want to say that Draymond and Rudy are a wash, which every Utah Jazz fan is going to blanch at that, I know. But if we want to say that the absences of Rudy Gobert tonight and Draymond are a wash, and the Warriors are then losing Klay Thompson, who they didn't have for the entire first half of the year anyways, or first third of the year, this is a blowout win against the best team in the NBA or the second best team in the NBA, depending on how you feel about them. And a team that many pundits have said is the deepest team in the NBA. I feel like I'm seeing on my timeline a lot of Jazz fans kind of glossing over this. Have we not? Did you forget what happened last month? This is an awesome, fun win. And I guess what I'm getting to is, after all the sadness over the past month, I'm hoping that y'all had some fun tonight. Donovan had some great plays. Udoka Azubuike had a play that we all kind of hoped would happen when we drafted him. An alley-oop pass from Royce O'Neal. By the way, better passer than you think. And if he has to take on more passing responsibility, I'd be excited to see it. Royce threw up a beautiful lob off of not a fast break, a normal offensive play to Udoka Azubuike, and he grabbed it from the stratosphere and slammed it down. It was really fantastic to see. And Doak had a very solid game, again, a solid outing against a tough Warriors offense. There actually might be an NBA player in him. I said before, I think his performance the past few games has been better than, say, Ed Davis when he was on the Jazz for a year. If you want to kind of put into context of, like, what does Doak mean to the Jazz or as an asset? He's been better than Ed Davis, which I think people would be surprised about. As bad as Ed Davis was in his 1 year for Utah, I don't think anyone ever expected Doak to have this kind of like a positive level impact. So today was great. I hope you had fun today. I really hope you had fun watching the game today. Got some folks in the Twitter spaces. Hi, hello, welcome. If you ever, just letting you know, I'm also on YouTube. Posted that link earlier if you want to check out my timeline. If you want to see me on video, I got my 97 Western Conference Champions hat. I'm drinking a 10% beer because it's Wednesday and it's party time. And if you want to ask a question, happy to take it. Happy to talk about anything. I'm about to talk into Nickeil Alexander-Walker and who he is. What should we expect from him? And what the departure of Joe Ingles means for the Jazz. But I want to let everyone on the Twitter spaces know that if I hear you, if you ask a question, it'll also be on YouTube. Don't worry, you don't have to show your face. That's just for me. That's just for me to show my ugly face. But we will hear you. So the trade today. I think folks were, when people were talking about the CJ McCollum to the Pelicans rumors that have been going on for a little while. And the background on that being a little bit that David Griffin, the GM of the Pelicans, he's fighting for his job right now. So he made a little bit of a desperation trade for, not this year, I mean, making the play-in tournament this year would be nice. There is an outside chance to get Zion Williamson back this year and kind of do some damage in the play-in tournament, whatever. He made this trade for next year. That if he has McCollum, Ingram, and Zion Williamson, that is a playoff team that is worth keeping his job for. So he makes this crazy trade for CJ McCollum, which was very short-sighted, that he actually gave up a first-round pick for, But in the rumors, everyone was kind of saying, well, if the Pelicans get CJ McCollum, they have to give up a pick and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and we'll see where Portland goes from there. I think trading McCollum was a smart move for Portland. Everyone's looking at Portland like, what the fuck is Portland doing? They're tearing the whole thing down. But it doesn't make any sense what they're doing. They got Damian Lillard. Well, Damian Lillard's not going to play this year. So they're trying to just build up a ton of assets to go into this summer and say, Dame, look at what we got for you. Not say, Dame, we're going to throw you out there with Nasir Little and Anthony Simons and a bunch of garbage. He's saying I think they're going to try to turn those assets into something useful. But Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not going to help the Trailblazers this year or next year. He is a recent draft pick, but he hasn't shown enough promise to be a powerful player that will affect the Blazers' championship hopes as like a starter level player that Dame can play alongside. But he isn't a total washout yet. Unlike some other guard rookies in recent drafts, Alexander Walker hasn't been so bad that he is an immediate NBA washout. I'm not sure if that guy has what it takes. He's been okay. I'm pulling up the Pistons roster for something a little relevant. For some reason, my brain keeps thinking of Saban Lee, but that's not who I'm thinking of. Killian Hayes. Why couldn't I remember that? I was like, there's a French countryman of Rudy Gobert who is a high point guard draft pick of the Pistons. He was drafted in the high lottery by the Pistons a couple years ago, and Killian Hayes is meant to be a point guard of the future for the Pistons. He's meant to be a real point guard. He has been so bad. Like, avert your eyes. He shouldn't be in the league yet. Like, he should be in the G League. But you can't really put a high lottery pick in the G League without admitting total failure, right? Like, you can put first round picks in the G League for a few stints, like Utah did with Rudy Gobert, and Rudy really showed his, like, no, I'm an NBA player when he played for the Bakersfield Gym, but Killian Hayes just really doesn't have it. I'm sure I sound like a total expert not remembering his name and speaking eloquently of him, but look, I'm drinking a 10% beer. You have quell your expectations on name memory. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is not that bad yet. I think that, and I think this is also fair to Killian Hayes, Alexander Walker has not played on any semblance of a decent team yet. And he's also had expectations be sort of decently high. But that's not what Utah will expect of him. With Joe Ingles having an injury, there was definitely a void in the backcourt for any sort of ball handling. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker kind of fits that very fine line, but as a decent ball handler who can fill in the second unit and do some positive things in a positive winning environment. He is like a step above, probably a tier and a half or maybe even 2 tiers above the point of signing Emmanuel Mudiay as a minimum free agent. Mudiay obviously was terrible, and he's yet to play in the NBA again. I'm actually surprised Mudiay hasn't gotten an NBA stint during coronavirus protocols, but alas. Alexander Walker has much more potential than Mudiay. He's also younger. He's also still on his rookie contract. There's still something there with Alexander Walker. I think I'm just saying that I'm not surprised if he eventually goes towards the Mudiay route of eventually being out of the league. However, he's much younger and we've gotten Alexander Walker much earlier than anybody got their hands on Mudiay to maybe improve his habits a little bit. Alexander Walker is Jordan Clarkson, but way worse, right? Like he is, but he's a bad shooter. He is a gunner, though. He likes to shoot and score. That's his mindset. And I think everyone is really surprised that this is the kind of archetype he has been in the NBA. Because at Virginia Tech, where he played college ball, he was a fantastic defender and more of a jack-of-all-trades type of guard, where he was a passer, he was a shooter, he was a scorer, but off-ball, on-ball, he did a lot of great stuff for Virginia Tech, which is why he ended up a lottery pick. And then he just kind of ended up in New Orleans. It's just like, give me the ball, I'm going to shoot the rock, which is like kind of not what you expected out of him. So I think in a bench guard role, he's a great second draft idea. It takes guards a little bit of time to learn the NBA more than just a forward who's got size and he's going to score because he's bigger than you, or he just kind of, the 6'8 guys have a little bit easier going than the 6'4 guys like Alexander Walker, who kind of have to figure out the NBA, especially passing. Like, how long can I wait before I throw this pass? Random example tonight. Donovan Mitchell knew exactly how much time he had dilly-dallying in the paint before he had a chuck around, a wrap-around pass to Bojan Bogdanovic. I don't know if it was Bogey in the corner, but he had a player in the corner that he knew he had. And he waited a half second too long, but was pretty confident he still had him. And it took an astronomical effort from Gary Payton, one of the most fabulous guard defenders in the NBA right now, to tip Donovan's pass away to not hit that corner shooter. Donovan has those instincts that he had pretty well as a rookie, but it takes a lot of guards, a lot of time to learn when can I make that pass to the corner after trying to score at the rim. I think we have a good environment for Alexander Walker to learn that. I think it's equally likely that he's out of the league as Emmanuel Mudiay, as it is equally likely that he becomes as good as Alec Burks. And you might be thinking to yourself, Alec Burks has bounced around the league. He's kind of fucking bad. I don't want Alec Burks on the Jazz. Well, I think right now we'd like Alec Burks on a minimum contract as our 8th guy. Joe Ingles is injured for the year. We could really use Alec Burks right now. A guy who is still not a great defender, but has the brains to understand where he should be and funnel stuff to guys like Mitchell Robinson, who is his next teammate right now. I think Alexander Walker could be a great developmental prospect for the Jazz. He's not been Killian Hayes bad. He's been just, what are you doing bad? For reference, Emmanuel Mudiay, he was Killian Hayes bad. He had never figured out point guard stuff. Adam Maris is he's one of the leaders of DNVR. He's a Denver Nuggets analyst mainstay. If you love NBA basketball, you gotta follow Adam. It's obviously a lot of Nugget stuff, but he's a smart NBA guy, really smart guy. Because I'm lame and I don't know anybody, I was like starstruck when I met him at a Christmas party. We had a mutual friend and I met him. And we had a few drinks and we talked about Emmanuel Mudiay when he was still a Nugget. It was Mudiay's last season as a Nugget. I've never seen a guy so exasperated. So we had a lot of talk about like what Mudiay does well, what he doesn't do well, like how could he improve. This was way before he was a Jazz man, right? This was before he was even a Knick. And that's where Killian Hayes is going. But Alexander Walker I see more as like a combo guard who needs a home with good habits. Alexander Walker's going to be in the league for a lot longer than Mudiay is, I think. And I love it if he turns into a good player than just like we're stuck with him. The Joe Ingles piece of this. I want to be short with this because I don't think there isn't much exposition that's needed. I think a lot of people are talking way too much about Joe Ingles. That is frustrating me. Let's get the facts out of the way for everyone listening. Joe Ingles is an expiring contract. He has no contract to play in the National Basketball Association next year. He will be a free agent this summer. Second fact, Joe Ingles has a torn ACL that he suffered literally a week and a half ago. I think it actually might be shorter. It wasn't that long ago. Joe Ingles will be injured until next February, next March, next Christmas if we're being super optimistic, right? Joe Ingles is out, and he will be for a long time. This summer, as a free agent, who is signing Joe Ingles? He's 34 years old. He just had a torn ACL. He's had 2 years now of having limited athletic impact, even further than his normal baseline athleticism. Last year, he was the runner-up for Sixth Man of the Year because of his unbelievable shooting that has also tapered off. I still believe Joe Ingles is a NBA rotation player, but this summer he is a free agent. This eulogy for Joe Ingles as a Jazz man, I think it is drastically premature and makes me really uncomfortable. Both Joe and Renee, his wife, posted tweets and Instagram stories today about like sadness and how sad they are that this ride has come to an end. I know that team management will never come straight up to a guy and say, hey man, don't worry, we got you, we're going to sign you back this offseason. You never know where the team's going to go. Mitchell could demand a trade and all sorts of shit, and all of a sudden the Jazz are looking at their team being like, we shouldn't bring back Joe Ingles on a minimum. Like, we shouldn't do that. You never want to make promises that you can't keep. You want to, as a team, you want to offer contracts for money and give a guy a pat on the back and say, I hope our paths cross again. So I understand why Joe and Renee Ingles in their social media are saying, like, this is the end, we're sorry. Or not sorry, but like, we're sad and this is terrible. But at the same time, I think it's disingenuous for Jazz fans right now to think, well, this is the end for Joe Ingles. That guy is still an NBA player, and his injury, as much as I would love it for it not to have happened, actually makes his re-signing with the Jazz next year more plausible. Because no NBA team is going to offer, I shouldn't say no. I find it exceedingly implausible for an NBA team to offer Joe Ingles a contract above the minimum, which at his age and experience level is actually kind of a lot of money. You know, it's not like a minimum contract for a 23-year-old. As you get older in the NBA and you have more years of experience, more specifically, the value of your minimum contract actually gets pretty up there. And as an 8th-year player, his minimum contract would be kind of a lot. If you look at Hassan Whiteside's contract this year, you actually look at it and be like, oh, that's not nothing for a guy just getting the quote-unquote minimum. So I don't think there are many teams out there who would go to Joe Ingles and say, like, we'll give you 3 years, $15 million. Who's going to do that for a 34-year-old who can't play until February? And may not help your team, and who might not even want to fucking be there, right? So I think the best option for Joe, who is going to, by the way, he's not going to take a single flight to Portland. He is going to remain in Salt Lake City, which is why the sadness, that was the only piece of the Joe and Renee post that made me a little feel weird. It's like, they're not moving, right? Like, it's not like they have to take any of their kids out of schools. They don't have to search new therapy for Jacob, their son who has autism spectrum disorder. They don't have to do anything special. They're going to stay in Salt Lake City. They're not fucking going anywhere. So I found that part weird, that they felt like their life was ending as they knew it in Salt Lake City. I know they're itching to get back to Australia, but if his NBA career is continuing, they're going to stay in Salt Lake City. It makes way too much sense from a positional perspective, from a role perspective, from a Ryan Smith wallet perspective, just to bring Joe Ingles back on a minimum contract. Whether you frame that as a 1-year contract or a 1 year plus 1 year team option, or even I I would not be upset if Ryan Smith to beat out some random offer that like the Sacramento Kings offered, right? If the Ryan Smith had to like up his appeal to the Jazz for Joe Ingles, why not offer him 2 years guaranteed at the minimum plus a team option, right? Because the Kings would probably my random shitty team example is the Kings offering 2 years $8 million, right? But the second year is fully unguaranteed, right? If Joe Ingles comes back and the Kings are in playoff contention with their newly acquired Domantas Sabonis, and they're hoping that Ingles comes back and gives them a boost on the second unit, and all of a sudden they're a 6th seed. Well, they'll pick up that unguaranteed second-year option. I can see some team like the Kings offering like a 2-year, $8 million deal, but maybe Ryan Smith says, "Hey, I'll give you 2 years guaranteed at the minimum, which I think will be about $6 million or maybe a little under that." I don't have my cap sheets in front of me. Maybe someone on the Spaces can correct me if they do know. I think that would be 2 years, $6 million, guaranteed. Just like, hey, you're a Jazz legend. You're here forever. And it's not like he's Udonis Haslem yet. That guy can run a pick and roll. And if in the second year of that guaranteed minimum contract, he's mothballed, unless Conley gets hurt or Donovan gets hurt, and he needs to play 20 minutes a game, I think you can do a whole lot worse. Hitting the high notes, you're live on Salt City Hoops live postcast. What's going on?
Did you call me? Is that happened?
Yeah, what's up, man? You're live.
Oh, all right. Well, we've been doing a lot of Spaces today, and that came up in quite a few, the Joe Ingles thing, and a lot of people, there are a lot of people out there who are like, okay, so he's probably, we all kind of understand that there's a good chance that he's coming back. Like, if it was today, like if not season started today, I think there's, a good chance that the Jazz sign him. But I think I understand from the point of people being sad that he's off the team, he's traded. That is, factual. And I don't know, maybe in 5-6 months something weird happens. And me personally, I'm not going to get sad about it until, he signs a contract with somebody else. But I guess I do understand there are some people out there who are sad because, it could be. This could be the last. I think it is unlikely. I think it is the most likely scenario that Joey does come back. But there is a world out there. You can convince me that Joe Ingles is not on the Jazz next year for whatever reason. So,
I think you're absolutely right, and I just muted you to for my own persnickiness about audio, but I'll mute you in a second as I get your response. I think you're absolutely right. I don't mean to be glib about the chances that Joe Ingles doesn't return. I just find I know that the Jazz had to formally put out a 2-minute social media video thanking Joe Ingles for his contributions to the Jazz. It just feels icky to me and doesn't feel right, considering that it's possible he'll be back, right? It's not like he has 3 years left on his contract and maybe we'll see him later. It's kind of like, hey man, we needed to add Alexander Walker to the team right now. It made sense. You're not leaving Salt Lake City for rehab. We'll take care of your training. It's actually, I don't totally recall the CBA rules on which team picks up the cost of rehab, but I find it very notable that Mike Elliott was the former director of sports performance at the Jazz. He was recently let go, I think 2 years ago, but Joe Ingles called him out as someone who will be responsible for his rehabilitation. So I think there's even if it's not with a Jazz employee, he has a very strong Utah Jazz connection taking care of his rehab. But I think you bring up a very valid point, which is tough for my heart to reconcile, which is, well, he might not be back. But if that's the case, I would hope that after free agency concludes and he signs with a different team, for instance, because he's not going to finish free agency unsigned, right? He will sign with somebody, even if it's for a minimum unguaranteed contract, Joe Ingles will not be a free agent by the end of the offseason. Guaranteed. Somebody's going to sign him. And if it's not the Jazz, it'll be somebody else. Unless Joe says, I'll wait for the Jazz to call. And if and when he gets signed by another team, that's when I will write out my top 10 Joe Ingles moments. Does that make sense?
No, I get you. That's for me too. I'm not particularly super sad or anything. Like Joe Ingles is literally one of my favorite players. I started to put on a Jazz uniform, and I'm not out here going, "Oh my God, I can't believe he's gone." Because to me, there is a 95% chance that he'll be back in a Jazz uniform. But I do try to manage expectations. So, and that's one of the things. There's a chance that he might not be, and if that happens at that time, that happens at that time. But I for those who don't know, I work for a news station, and if this was a regular news cycle for us, we'd be putting out there Joe Ingles stories and doing a top 5 Joe Ingles stuff, and just because technically he isn't there, and if in my profession, if we don't put it out now, and all of a sudden, in August he sends it to somebody else, it's it might be too late for that, to do the goodbye stuff. So I get why the Jazz did. I get why some fans are upset about it. And I think you were right before. It's one of the things that I was talking about today, and some basically was the Jazz flipped Joe Ingles for, and 2 unknowns. Alexander Walker's son here is. I don't know if he's great. I don't know if he's good, but I know he's young. He has a couple of physical gifts that some of the other Jazz guards don't have. He's only 23, so he's only 3 years in the league. He's shown some flashes. So the Jazz, flipped that contract to get something that they at least have a chance to look at close up. Give them a chance to, they get younger and get a contract in their control. Even if they're not quite sure they're ready to give Alexander Walkerson an extension, they'll have a chance to match it in restricted free agency if he does do well. And if he doesn't, well, cut your losses. Joe Ingles wasn't going to help you this year anyway, so I think that point was well made.
Thank you, friend. I forgot to mention why I was surprised by that trade, which is I gave a preface to it, which was it wasn't surprising that the Pelicans included him in a McCollum trade, because the rumors were that the Pelicans were looking at McCollum and trading some really crappy first, and Alexander Walker made a lot of sense. I was surprised at the level of pick that the Pelicans gave up, but this is not a Pelicans broadcast, but I can shit on them as much as I want to. But Alexander Walker was always going to be part of that return to Portland. I was stunned to see Portland switch him to the Jazz, right? It maybe flipping Alexander Walker to another team that could use a prospect and another bad team, and maybe he'll do something. The more I think about it, I think the Jazz were worried that without Ingles, they don't have a 4th ball handler. Trent Forrest has been okay the past couple weeks, but he has... Between Trent Forrest's last 2 weeks and Alexander Walker's career, I think I would take Trent Forrest's last 2 weeks. But if you balance the two guys, I think you'd rather have Alexander Walker's career as a more accurate gauge of what might happen as needing a 4th ball handler going forward. If Mike Conley was 28, I don't think the Jazz might say fuck it, 3 ball handlers, let's go for it. But even in the playoffs, I don't think you can do Conley more than 33, 34 minutes. And God forbid you get a 7-game series, and God forbid Conley gets hurt. I think you'd rather have Mitchell and Clarkson. I'll get to my second point about Clarkson. But yeah, I think you'd rather have Mitchell and Clarkson running those shows and having Trent Forrest and Nikhil Alexander-Walker playing with each other on that second unit if Conley gets hurt. So I think Alexander-Walker makes more sense as like a, well, we can't do nothing at the trade deadline, right? We have to get something for Joe Ingles that is more than just tax savings. And the Jordan Clarkson point is the entire premise about getting a wing defender or a guard defender who is better as a point of attack defender than the Jazz currently have was always going to be predicated on Jordan Clarkson plus one of the Jazz's limited available picks. I was pretty surprised that Harrison Barnes was available for a healthy Joe Ingles and maybe a pick or something. But the Kings are the Kings. Well, Joe Ingles is hurt now and he's not even a Jazz man. Anyways. So right now, the Jazz's path to acquiring an improvement in that department is via Jordan Clarkson being jettisoned. And regardless of your thoughts on Trent Forrest or even Jared Butler for that matter, who is not playoff ready, by the way, as it stands, would like him to be. I don't like it when fans accuse me of hating the Jazz just because I can accurately assess that Jared Butler's not ready for the playoffs. But the guy can do. Don't think he's ready. If the Jazz need another ball handler, then yeah, it makes sense to have Jordan Clarkson. But if the Jazz are without Joe Ingles and they need to trade Jordan Clarkson to improve on the defense perspective, then your only ball handlers are Donovan and Mike Conley. And now you're kind of looking at your roster like John Travolta and Pulp Fiction, like, who can dribble? Right? And if Trent Forrest is your third ball handler, you might be in a world of hurt. I don't think Alexander Walker is a guaranteed third ball handler, but I do think that he is insurance for if we do get a Jordan Clarkson deal done. Jordan Clarkson today, decent game. I will be sad if he leaves. Let me check
I have some interesting video of him because the Jazz were so short-handed today. They had to put Jordan Clarkson out there with the garbage time crew, and I don't know. I don't. I really hate being the body language police because a lot of times we can't really assess it through a screen very well. But I was like watching him walk out. I'm like, okay, maybe he kind of knows that like this is his last time walking out there. It's not like he did the point to the crowd like Drew Brees or anything, but kind of left. And unfortunately, like I can't professionally tweet it out like this Donovan Mitchell video I'm working on. But it'll be interesting. And if you want it, DM me, and you guys can look at it yourself.
Well, Jordan Clarkson has always been an unreliable narrator of his body language, right? He has been despondently sad in times where he claims that he wasn't. And I think he is a guy that is very aware of the moment when he's on the court. And as soon as he is able to leave the court, he becomes JC. He becomes a different guy. And I truly believe him when he says that he is in a space where off the court, he is comfortable with just being a guy who is happy at his age and doing what he loves. But I do see him as a guy who flourished with the Jazz when he was wanted. When we traded for him, he was wanted and just said, all right, you want me for me? When I was in Cleveland, I learned how to shoot the 3-ball. I learned how to extricate the mid-range 2 for my game. And Utah wants that. I'm going to provide that. And this year, I think, has sapped a lot of his confidence. And Jordan Clarkson without confidence is a guy who record scratches the offense a little bit. I don't know about how much to read in, to your point. I don't know how much to read in the body language at the end of the game. He's been in there with garbage time lineups last year even. And he's kind of like, what the fuck am I out here for? But that was at a time when like Jazz had a bunch of guys with like the Jazz will have a bunch of guys on assignment to the Stars or something, so it'll be like 4 scrubs in Clarkson. Right? Like you'll have last year I remember like Doak was either injured or with the Stars, and like Favors was injured or something, and you ended up with like all of the Jazz bench wing guys and Clarkson just kind of running up the string. He was always kind of like just like jogging back and forth. I'm going to save my Jordan Clarkson soliloquy for after the trade deadline, if he's actually gone. Jordan Clarkson, I've been watching the Jazz for a long time, not as long as most people, but I'm in my 30s now. I've been watching the Jazz for a while. A few players that have given me as much joy as Jordan Clarkson. And if today was his last day in a Jazz uniform, I don't know if I'll be sad, because that'll mean that we're getting I sure as shit hope that we're getting a net positive player on like the defensive end or something that really fits with the Jazz. So I don't know if sad's the right word, but I will have a lot of good memories about Jordan Clarkson that I want to talk about if he's gone. If Jordan Clarkson's still on the team on Friday, that dude has a variance that has a ceiling that is unbelievably high. A good Jordan Clarkson elevates this team to ridiculous levels. We haven't seen good Jordan Clarkson this year. The guy needs a confidence boost. And there might not be a better confidence boost for a guy like Jordan Clarkson than saying, guess what, buddy? We're keeping you. And the kind of guys who are around the Jazz, like if, for instance, if Joe Ingles gets waived by the Blazers, which is likely, and Joe Ingles is Clarkson's best friend, if you get Joe Ingles kind of like around the locker room and around the team a little bit, and you get the Jazz as they're currently constructed, Jordan Clarkson might get that confidence boost. It's like, you know what? I do have this. I have the verve. There are obvious areas for Clarkson to improve. I don't give a flying fuck if his 3-point shot isn't going down, but there are decisions he's making this year that he never made in the prior year and a half with the Jazz. And if he just improves those aspects, he is back to being an acceptable player on the court. And I think the confidence level will help him with that. I've been chatting for a long time. Drinking a 10% beer here. But I want to give hitting the high notes. Last thought if you got one.
I will say this. If tonight was Jordan Clarkson's last game, I want to say that his last shot was really amazing. I'm pretty sure that it was a step back three that just was silky smooth, and he didn't hit a lot of them today, but he hit that one, and I was like, I was kind of like wishing professionally for me myself, like, Jordan, don't make anything else, because if that's your last shot, that's a really good video for your last shot. So
yeah, I agree with that. Dare I say he hit the high note on that one. He hit the altissimo range. He gave us a high D on that one. Anyways, that is Salt City Hoops live postcast. Jazz blow out the Warriors today. Big game for Donovan Mitchell. Not a great scoring game for him, but he almost hit that elusive triple-double for the Jazz. Still no regular season triple-double for the Jazz since 2008, Carlos Boozer. Fun fact, Jazz trade Joe Ingles' expiring injured contract for Nickeil Alexander-Walker. net positive move for the Jazz. We'll see what they got on tap for tomorrow. Great win against a playoff contending team that was without Draymond Green and Klay Thompson, but the Jazz were without Rudy Gobert. So winning so dominantly should improve everyone's spirits. If you did not have fun today, and if you're not feeling good about this team, after today, have a beer. Please. Because this team is fun, and I think it is worth cheering for. We'll see what happens in a crazy day tomorrow. Jazz are going to try to make a trade for an improvement on the defensive end. If they do not make a trade, this team can do it still. I believe that. I hope you do too. If you don't, flagpole at 3 p.m. I got my fists up. Anyways, great night tonight. Have a great night. Talk to you again for the next game. This has been Salt City Hoops Live. I'm Mark. Have a great night.